Welcome to Go Wellness Webinars. This is Kate Archibald, and I'm excited to have you guys on. We got a good-sized group, and I think it'll continue to get bigger as we get working through all this stuff. So today we are going to continue some of the training that we went over the weekend. We kind of spent a lot of times on some different topics, so we didn't get into correcting adrenal hormones, some of your stress hormones, and some of your other hormone patterns. And so Reagan and I are going to go through that today, so you can get a really good, good foundational understanding of how you can help people with those conditions. And then also, if you have not had a chance yet, if you are in on the East Coast, please get registered for our upcoming event. It'll be February 4th in Brooklyn, and so you'll probably see a couple emails about that, or you've probably already seen a few of those. But get registered. If you don't see that, email us at info@gowellness.com, and I'll get you all the details you need on that. But yeah, we're excited to have you on the webinar, and we're excited to jump into some of the topics that Reagan's going to cover today. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Reagan.
Hey everybody, good to have you here. So how many of you are running adrenal panels in your practice? Hopefully a lot of you are. If you're not running adrenal panels, you're missing one of the most critical components of adrenal health. One of the books that we give our patients is the book called The Hormone Cure by Sara Gottfried, and she is incredible. I've been able to do a few of her trainings, trained with her at a live session as well. And I think she's got an ability to explain hormones nicely. So there's plenty of other great hormone gurus out there. But when you look at the hormone cure, one of the things Dr. Gottfried discusses is cortisol, and how high cortisol or low cortisol can desensitize all of the other hormone receptor sites in your body. So if you want to have healthy hormones, one of the very first places to start is with cortisol. And so collecting an adrenal sample and testing it will give you an idea of how their cortisol levels are. Are there ways you can do it without sending anything to a lab? Well, you can do the pupillary response test. That's where you shine a light in somebody's eye, and the way that their pupil dilates or doesn't can be indicative of some type of adrenal issue. You can do the Ragland's test, where you have them lie down for a few minutes, about 3 or 4 minutes, and then you check their blood pressure, and then you have them stand up. And if their total points go up, that's great. If their total points jump up 10 points, that means they've got healthy adrenals. If their diastolic or systolic stays the same, or maybe it lowers, then they've got some problems with the adrenal glands. Because if you look at what the adrenal glands do, the inner part of the adrenals is related to the nervous system, and that's what we call the medulla, and they secrete and produce epinephrine and norepinephrine. And epinephrine and norepinephrine can actually help stabilize your blood pressure. Without proper levels of epinephrine, norepinephrine, you're not going to get that nice boost to help stabilize your blood pressure when you stand up. So adrenals are critical. The outer part, the cortex, is where you're producing about 50 different hormones. The adrenals, about the size of a walnut, they sit right on top of your kidneys, but they're very busy. And so the outer part is secreting cortisol, but it's also making DHEA and pregnenolone, all the precursors for your body. And one of the critical vitamins that the adrenals relies on, well, there's 2 of them. One of them is vitamin D, which technically is a hormone. It's a fat-soluble vitamin. And vitamin D is critical if you're going to produce the right amounts of cortisol, the right amounts of sex hormones, vitamin D is that precursor. The other vitamin that your adrenals depend on, especially for producing epinephrine and norepinephrine, is vitamin C. So if you have no clue, you just think someone is adrenal deficient, well, very first thing, get them on vitamin C, get them on vitamin D. Now, there's different forms of vitamin C. You don't want to just put them on a bunch of ascorbic acid. All that is cornstarch heated up, and they take the ascorbic acid, which is an antioxidant, and shove it into a pill form and call it vitamin C. You need the rutins, you need the flavonoids with it, and vitamin C, whole complex. Vitamin D is, if you look at cholecalciferol, vitamin D3, there's different versions of that too. We prefer vitamin D from natural stacks because it's got a combination. It's actually made from coconuts. So you want a vitamin D substance that's made from food, just like you want vitamin C. You want to look on the label and see, okay, this comes from, well, one of the big areas that vitamin C is made from is buckwheat. And so be careful if there's gluten in there for your patients who are gluten intolerant. But those are some of the two major things you can do to correct the adrenal glands. The other thing you want to look at is, okay, well, if the adrenal glands are making all these precursors for hormones, well, what are some other things that we can do? And that's exactly what we're going to discover today. I'm going to go through how to reveal labs, how to test for it, go through some of the controversies around adrenal fatigue. Does it exist? Does it not? Why don't endocrinologists really put a lot of stock into adrenal glands? Why do we? So we'll cover a lot of those myths and then shed some light on it. But yeah, without knowing what's going on with the adrenals, you're really not going to have anywhere to go with your patient if you're balancing their hormones. So first thing we do when patients come in is we test their adrenals. And I mean, that may sound obvious to you, but if you're not testing them, you're just playing guessing games with their health. And especially with premenopausal women or postmenopausal or menopausal women, this can change their life. So the best way to test the adrenals, as you can see, there's a kit here from Diagnostics, and there are several companies out there. Diagnostics tends to be one of the simplest ways. They've got great support staff. They can help you interpret the tests. Diagnostics, the thing I like about them is they do give you a nice clear readout. We also use Genova. We probably use Genova more than Diagnostics, but I like the printout to be clear and simple to read for the practitioner, but most importantly for the patient. So this is done through saliva. Now, why saliva? Well, first of all, if you've ever had your cortisol levels checked, the cortisol numbers through blood are just going to be a one-time deal. You can get total cortisol output, and that gives you a very good indicator of how well the adrenals are performing on a general level. But really, if you want to see how the adrenals are performing in the long run, you're going to need to do saliva. And so saliva is checked and tested and collected 4 times a day. So every time you give a patient these, you're going to tell them they're going to be collecting a lot of saliva, and it may not be fun. Hey, Kay, do you have a specific way that you talk to your patients about performing this test, and how do you ease their kind of trepidation around all this saliva?
So we'll just go over the kit with them, explain to how to get your saliva. If they have a tough time like spitting or secreting that much saliva, they can sniff on a lemon. That'll cause your salivary glands to activate a little more. And then it's every about 4 hours that they need to do that, and usually it's not too overwhelming for them, as long as you just keep it simple. But it can't, like, if you just hand them the box and tell them to do it, you'll get callbacks all day long.
Yeah, because one of the big things is you want to avoid the downstream effect is where you have people calling you because they're so confused. Oh, thanks. I appreciate it. Um, sorry, I need some water. I've been talking all morning. All right. So they get their test ran, and even people with dry mouths, yeah, they can chew on something, but make sure that they do this test properly. If you're just looking at the overall numbers, so the person wakes up in the morning, they're collecting their saliva, and they have to fill up that tube. These tubes get nice and filled up, so it's not a little bit of saliva, it's a lot. So you look at that in the morning between 6 and 8, and then between 11 and noon, and then between 4 and 5, and then once again 10 to midnight. And you can see on this test here, this person is incredibly depleted. So kind of the term adrenal fatigue does, there's a lot of skepticism behind it because can the adrenals really get fatigued? And is there a syndrome? And endocrinologists don't typically look at it, but there are classic symptoms. And if you look at true adrenal fatigue from more of a functional medicine perspective, that is where you've got low cortisol, which this person has low cortisol. You've got to have low DHEA, and then you've got to have low pregnenolone. And I don't have the pregnenolone numbers on this particular lab, but they were adrenal fatigue, the classic symptoms. One of the things that you look at is there's no real test beyond that to look at adrenal fatigue. I think in the future, what you're going to see is that there will be tests that actually show what's going on, because one of the issues is you have to look at the hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal axis, because part of the issue with this patient could be that there is miscommunication between the hypothalamus and the pituitary. There could be a breakdown, there could be inflammation around it. So it could be a breakdown in the HPA axis. But in general, if you're looking to diagnose somebody as adrenal fatigue, they've got to have those three criteria. They've got to have low cortisol load. They've got to have the low DHEA, and the third thing is the low pregnenolone. And so if you look at this patient, let's analyze this patient for a minute. And what do you guys think this person feels like? Because how does cortisol make you feel? I mean, when you have enough cortisol, it's actually a very powerful hormone, one of the most powerful hormones, because it's going to help you adapt to stress. It's the only anti-inflammatory hormone that your endocrine system produces. So cortisol is out there surveying the damage, and it's there to clean up the mess. That's why the other hormones, they respect cortisol so much that they'll take a back seat to it. Even your thyroid hormone that is responsible for metabolism, if cortisol's there, then the cells say, hey, we're not going to listen to thyroid. It's going to have to take a back seat. We want cortisol. So let's think about how this person must feel. Between 6 and 8 a.m., they wake up, and are they energized or are they tired? What would you guys think? Right? They're going to be very tired. They're going to have a very difficult time getting out of bed. So in your metabolic assessment that all of you guys are having your patients fill out, you'll see that's one of the questions. Do you have a hard time in the morning? The other thing that you'll see is they're going to wake up, and typically they will be brain fogged. They'll need coffee just to get going. This person is so tired in the morning that they'll probably push snooze 4 times on their alarm clock before they get up. And when they do get up, they feel heavy. They can feel depressed about the day. There's very low, motivation, and that's a significant issue. And especially in the morning, right after you go to sleep, right after you wake up from sleeping all night, you want your cortisol sky high, because that's what's waking you up. You're getting through the day. Your epinephrine and norepinephrine makes you feel alert and sharp, but not with this person. Between 11 and noon, how are they feeling? Is their energy up yet? No, they're still in a complete brain fog. This is where their brain's not turned on. They're still like they're on their third or fourth cup of coffee. They've done cocaine at this point. No, I'm joking. Hopefully not. Hopefully they haven't. But they were really looking for stimulants. And guess what kinds of food this patient was eating? Yes, the sugars. They're looking for starches. They're eating the cereal in the morning because they're too tired to make anything else. And then lots of coffee. They're reaching for that donut at 10 o'clock. Their blood sugar cannot be stabilized when cortisol is this low. This can also be the downfall of massive stress, massive trauma can lead to lab values that look like this. So when you see a patient's lab values that look like this, you're going to see these correlating symptoms. But then if you look at causative factors, you want to start asking, well, did you go through a divorce? Did you have financial stress, bankruptcy? Did you start a business? I mean, what brought your levels this low? Was there an infection? Was there heavy metal exposure? So you look at the emotional and the environmental aspects of it. But then you also want to look at any kind of physical trauma. So were you in an accident? Was there something, traumatic brain injury? Because all those things can cause this low cortisol response, because this is a body, and if it stays low for too long, they're going to die. This is not a healthy state to be in, because if you look at what causes the elevation of cortisol, one hormone that your liver releases at night when we're sleeping is called growth factor. It's a growth hormone. And these growth hormones are key for building system, making sure that you are recovering. If you didn't have growth hormone, you would not have a musculoskeletal system. Your muscles would fall right off the bones. And at night when you're sleeping, your growth hormone is secreted. And when the growth hormone is secreted, that's when your body really starts rebuilding itself, because you have cytokine 6 that breaks down your muscle fibers throughout the day as you're putting stress on your body, or if you're sitting too much, that's a problem. But then as the cytokines finally do their job of breaking things down, then cytokine 9, cytokine 10 comes in, and when you have growth hormone that fuels that, then you wake up. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but I'm always looking for definition in my abs, and it's less than it used to be, that's for sure. But in the morning, I can always see a little more definition in my abs, and I love it. At night, it's not the same, and so that's because growth hormone's there, and it's a fat burner. You burn more fat when you're sleeping than when you're awake, but if hormone that's getting secreted, you're going to have low cortisol levels. So you want to do things like take L-arginine at night, and the L-arginine will actually help your body produce more growth hormone. There's other things that have been shown to produce more growth hormone too, but L-arginine is one of my favorites. Ashwagandha has been one of the heavily studied herbs for that. Ginseng, rhodiola. Rhodiola is actually really awesome. Rhodiola and holy basil for growth hormone and recovery and adrenal fatigue. So those are some big things. You see their DHEA is low, and we prefer to use the 7-keto version of DHEA. It's safer. DHEA in the long run has been shown to have negative side effects on both the kidneys and possible cancer. So don't leave your patients on too much DHEA. I had a patient who came in so low that her naturopathic doctor or nurse practitioner, I can't remember which one it was, put her on 400 milligrams of DHEA, and she broke out in a beard, and she had acne, and I mean it was pretty serious. So the first thing we did is got her off that, put her on a liver cleanse, and guess what happened? Her DHEA was perfect, but she ended up with way too much. So you really have to watch that. So this person who you're seeing here at 11, 12, that's where they're reaching for donuts. They're looking for some quick energy still. They're just still feeling like crap. And by 4 to 5 p.m., maybe a little tiny surge. They might be feeling a little bit better, but their body's achy. They're sitting most of the day. And one of the reasons why sitting is so damaging is because our bodies actually go into a metabolic state. So catabolic is when your body starts needing glucose, and it needs energy supplies from itself, and that can be a dangerous position. So if you look at intermittent fasting, your body will temporarily go through catabolic metabolism, but it's actually good because the very first thing that your body will start going after are the cancerous cells, or it's the tissues that aren't thriving. It's getting rid of the junk that's broken in your body. That's what intermittent fasting will do, and it's brilliant. I try and do it at least once a week, usually twice. But that's where the catabolic metabolism gets rid of the stuff that you don't want. Anabolic metabolism is where your body's really rebuilding and growing and thriving. But when you're sitting all day, your body gets what's called into catabolic metabolism, and it starts atrophying. And the very first place that your adrenals will start robbing these muscle tissues for glucose and extra energy to make more cortisol is going to be from your butt and your legs. So if you have if your ghetto booty shrinking, it's not a problem for Cade, but for the rest of us, if it's shrinking, then you want to make you
You
want to make
love
sure.
my getup.
Yeah, that thing is huge. But you want to make sure that that you're not sitting too much. You're standing, you're sitting, you're moving your body around, because that's very problematic. The other thing you want to make sure that you're doing is squats. So do some full body squats, so you're actually engaging the cytokine 10, and then the cytokine 6 gets turned off, and you start building more muscle mass back there. But one of the see a person who's got adrenal fatigue, they're going to have that lower belly fat. They're going to have the Dowanger's hump almost. Their head's going to be slumped forward. Their lower belly fat, their apron's going to be hanging way low, and they won't have a butt. That's when it's purely adrenal. So be looking for that. So this person, maybe 4 to 5 at night, they start feeling a little better. And then right around midnight, right when they're ready to go to bed, they're restless. They they suddenly get a surge of energy, they get creative, and they're up for the rest of the night. So, finally they'll fall asleep at like 2 or 3 in the morning, and it's just this endless cycle. They have this moment of clarity, but it only lasts for about an hour or 2 hours, and then it keeps them up. So, here's another test. This is low cortisol all throughout the day. Now, one thing we have not addressed is the solutions. I've given you some herbal recommendations and talked to you about some causative factors, but if you're looking to correct the adrenal hormones, you exercise in a case like this. This person needs to morning. This person needs to exercise in the morning, because what does exercise do with your cortisol? It raises it up. And so actually the best way that you can correct your hormones is through exercise. Um, you can take hormones, bioidentical, whatever, and or save some of them aren't. But really, you want your body producing its own hormones, and that's what we want for our patients. But if they've got this low cortisol, and like this person, they're waking up. This is a Genova lab, by the way. But if they're waking up and their cortisol's flatlined, then have them exercise in the morning. Do a Tabata workout, 4 minutes. If that's all they can do, or 8 minutes. Or have them do super slow. Super slow is a really one of the most powerful workouts. It takes 10 to 12 minutes, and it's 2 minutes per muscle group. You go until utter failure. It hurts. This exercise was put together by a well-known physician, Doug McGuff, and he's done studies on over 380 elderly patients with osteoporosis. And doing super slow, he was able to reverse osteoporosis in virtually every single case, and he did it faster than the group that was doing non-super slow workouts. So look at Body by Science with Doug McGuff, and if you don't have that book, get it, have it in your office to give your patients. We have a specific handout on it. If you look in your manuals, I believe it's the first manual or the second manual that's got the super slow workouts. Anyway, so they're going to be exercising in the morning or whenever cortisol values are the lowest. A person who's got overall cortisol fatigue, like this patient here, if you start pushing them on too hard of workouts, they're not going to recover. So remember, if we're trying to shut down those cytokines that are keeping the body in this breakdown mode, the anabolic metabolism, that's going to be problematic if you push them into a strong workout. And this is why your patients who come to you and they're like, I work out every day for 2 hours, I push myself, and it's sheer willpower. They are exhausting their jing. Their resources are being depleted, and they can't recover because they don't have that recovery phase because their adrenals aren't producing any cortisol. And so you need cortisol there. Once growth factor comes in and everything's being rebuilt, cortisol's got to clean up that metabolic mess. It's got to clean up the inflammation, help those tissues heal. Cortisol is a beautiful hormone. Um, and having more cortisol is much better. So you want these patients with low cortisol to be consuming 60 to 70% of their calories from fats, like French fries, KFC, trans fatty acids. Those are ideal. They aren't ideal. So I'm joking. So I don't know if anyone
Let's
got
see if
that.
anyone's listening.
Yeah, but yeah, I dare you to put your patients on that, and then let me know what your results are like. Even if it's like Mark Hyman telling you to do that, some of us probably would because, he's like the wizard, but this is not the route you want to take. You want to get them on really good healthy fats. And at the seminar last weekend, which for those of you, there's several of you on this webinar who were there, it was so good having you there. I mean, talk about a cool experience. But we talked about some of the ways of getting fats because 60 to 70% of calories from fat. So that means about 130 grams of fat every day. And so where are you going to get those? And many of you remember I wrote down several things on the board, not that you could read my handwriting, but that's going to be like your avocados. That's going to have about 21 grams of fat. That's going to be from butter. Your grass-fed butter or ghee is going to have about 12 grams of fat per tablespoon. Coconut oil is going to have about 12 grams of fat per tablespoon to 15. Actually, you look at nuts, cashews, mac nuts. Mac nuts actually have about 50 grams of fat per half a cup. Cashews have about 25 grams. Olive oil is going to have about 15 grams per tablespoon. Olives, you can do a half cup of olives, get about 20 grams of good, healthy fats. You can have some good fats from your meats, all those things. But I like to start out my mornings with about 50 grams of fat, and that's what we like our patients doing with lots of vegetables. Ideally, they're getting about 5,000 milligrams of potassium first thing in the morning with about 50 grams of fat. So where are they getting their potassium? Not from bananas, no fruit in the morning. The only time you can do any sugar, especially if you're trying to regulate someone's cortisol levels, is at night. That's the only time they can eat fructose, 15 to 25 grams max on the fructose. So the way they're getting the potassium is going to be from 10 to 12 cups of leafy greens is
Oh,
going to have
hey
5,000.
Reagan, you cut out right at the punchline there.
Okay. Well, I don't have the patience to go back because my adrenals are fatigued. I'm joking. What was the punchline? Which
Right.
one?
You were saying right as you were saying 2 to 3 grams of something.
2 to 3 grams. Okay.
I
Well,
I don't know.
what I was referring to is no sugar in the morning, and you need to get 10 to 12 cups of leafy greens. Did that part go through?
No,
That mean
maybe
so I was talking about
that might.
potassium. So 10 to 12 cups of leafy greens has 5,000 milligrams of potassium. An avocado has 1,000 milligrams of potassium. A banana, maybe 400 milligrams of potassium. So you'd have to eat like a dozen bananas just to get in your quantities for potassium. Potassium will save your life as a practitioner. You cannot supplement with potassium. Maybe some of you know of a supplement that is healthy for potassium, but usually it's very hard on the kidneys. And it's unstable unless it's got its synergistic properties around it. So we recommend highly you got to get it from food. You can get about 500 milligrams of potassium from wild-caught salmon. You can get about 800 milligrams of potassium from grass-fed beef or bison. Um, you can get potassium from fruit, yes, but minimal quantities. The best source is going to be from your leafy greens. And the other thing that you're going to need if you've got thyroid issues or cortisol issues is high levels of magnesium, and most people are depleted in magnesium. And so that the best source for magnesium is going to be the green stuff. So your leafy greens, right in the the chlorophyll that makes plants green. That's where you're going to get the best sources of magnesium. And then around that's going to be potassium, because what potassium does is it's like creates a chain for insulin to carry sugar, and the sugar jumps on the potassium chain and gets into the blood. And potassium also helps alleviate the extra fluids that get built up intracellularly from too much sugar. Not that any of you have ever eaten too much sugar, but you know your patients do. And having high levels of potassium actually drains out all of that excess fluid, all the water that gets built up. So very powerful. So if you want to balance someone's cortisol, key principles, of course they have to have adequate levels of vitamin D, vitamin C. They need to be on some adaptogenics. You'll put them on Adrenalplex, Kidney Ion Tonic, Holy Basil, Rhodiola, are some great ones as well. But the other thing is they need to be eating 5,000 milligrams of potassium, and then 60 to 70% of their calories from fats. And then when do they need to exercise? Well, whenever their values are the lowest. So this patient here, you can see their values are pretty good. Like in the morning, you do not want this person exercising in the morning because their cortisol levels are already they're revved up. They're ready to fire out of the gates. This is like Dr. Antori's cortisol in the morning, right? Or maybe you, Anna, or Nam, or Peter. But we're fired up. We're ready to go. Best time to exercise in this case is going to be more around like that, maybe 2 o'clock, because you want them to exercise about an hour before their adrenals drop, or before cortisol drops to its lowest. And a person like this they'll do the very best on the high intensity interval trainings, some of those HIIT workouts. Tim Ferriss had a new guest on his show recently who wrote the 1-minute workout. Doing the high intensity, not a lot of time. That's where I feel the best. I recover better. If I jump in too heavily into like CrossFit workouts, I notice that it's really difficult for me to recover hormonally. So watch that in your patients. But this person, anyone who has high cortisol, the thing you're probably questioning is like, well, Reagan, if someone's got a little bit high, I mean, this person's pretty balanced, but high cortisol. Exercise does raise the cortisol, but at the secondary effect is exercise also causes inflammation. And you want a little bit of inflammation. That's how your body heals. And so at the back end of exercise, if you're causing inflammation, then cortisol is going to be used to rebuild the body and create healthy tissue structures. So very powerful. And exercise keeps us all sane. Okay, let's look at this patient. So would you surmise that this patient could possibly have some type of adrenal fatigue? Hopefully from what you've learned so far, that's going to be a yes. Because this person, I mean, you look at them post-awakening, they're tired. It's low, sample number 2 is low, sample number 3 is low, sample number 4 is okay right before sleep. But their daily total cortisol output is 15.3. That's way too low. HEA is also hovering on the low end. So this is probably a person who's been pushing themselves really hard. Some of our patients, I've had 3 patients, three patients, husband and wife, and then another patient who have been, they do the Wasatch 100, and they do these 100-mile races. And it's really interesting to see that their cortisol levels, by the time they're done with the race, I mean, it's just flat. Their cortisol levels start out pretty healthy, but as they get deeper and deeper into their training, I mean, these guys are running like 60 to 80 miles per week, and then they go and do this 100-mile run. And one of my patients you have to finish it in 36 hours. Yes, hours. It's crazy. Otherwise, you don't finish the race. And the whole goal is just to finish. I mean, of course, there's some crazy ultra runners out there that will, they're going to be competing and they'll finish it in, you know, whatever, 12, 15 hours. But one of my patients got literally a half a mile away from the finish line. And by the end, you're so exhausted because you haven't slept. And by the end, like she would just stop and she'd have to take a nap. And then she'd walk and then stop and take a nap. And she was so exhausted that she was a half a mile away, and it was 35 hours and 30 minutes. So she had 30 minutes to make it a half. She didn't make it. She was devastated. And then she went the next year and she made it, but she was like, her cortisol just did not make it. And so I put her on a bunch of adaptogenic herbs, and basically I was like, you need to give me a year to get your body built up after this. And so lots of fats. She was definitely a carb loader. And if you're running that kind of a race, I'm like, you eat pizza, you drink beer, you do whatever you can to get energy. But building up to it, we got her body doing more ketosis, and we helped stabilize her blood sugar because one of the big issues she had was, her blood sugar was just getting so low, and her cells were not becoming receptive to any type of sugar she's putting in her body because her cortisol levels were so hammered. And so we got her on lots of good healthy fats. We trained her on how to get into ketosis, and she finished the next year in like 28, 29 hours, I believe, 28 or 29 hours. I mean, that was incredible. Husband. And so pretty cool things. But this is a person, if you look at their cortisol, I mean, what's their stress levels like? Because I bet you this person is pretty beat up. Either they're stressed at work, they're not exercising, not exercise, and just assaulting your body by sitting all day can create low cortisol too. Because remember, the adrenals will start using proteins from your butt and your legs, and they'll start using that to make glucose and sugar, and they'll go into your body goes into stress when you're sitting. It feels like something's wrong because something is wrong. You need to be moving. Um, so let's go to the ways that we correct it. There's a formula that I like a lot, Adrenalplex. Apex has a really good a product for regulating the adrenals. It's called adaptocrine. And as with anything, you have to be careful. Licorice root is used a lot with low cortisol because, or excuse me, with high cortisol because licorice root, gansao, what it can do is actually rob pregnenolone. So it will steal pregnenolone, which is like that's like the prebiotic for all your hormones is pregnenolone, and you need it to make healthy, adequate hormones. And if you're eating licorice root, but you also have hypertension, you're going to cause a patient to stroke out. So you got to be careful with that. All right, so Adrenalplex is made by Evergreen. Adaptocrine is a really good formula. I don't like to keep people on formulas for too long. Adrenal fatigue, I want to kind of regulate them off, regulate them off. Adaptocrine's got holy basil, rhodiola. I believe it's got some ashwagandha. Now, ashwagandha it's what's considered to be a nightshade, and so some people have reactions to nightshades. So you're going to want to be careful with that. But there's other things you can do. So Adrenalplex is a great formula unless someone's suffering from hot flashes. Don't give it to them. There is some heat building herbs in there. Cordyceps 3, this is Cordyceps, astragalus, and ginseng. Now, one of my favorite herbs is Cordyceps because Cordyceps is a longevity herb. It helps build the kidneys up. It's a formula that's been shown to help with endurance. Ginseng, of course, they've given in several studies. It seems like the biggest study I find cited on ginseng is they take a group of mice and they basically, one group of mice, they put them in water and see how far mice can swim before they drown. The other group, they give them ginseng and see if they can swim farther, and whenever they give them ginseng, they swim farther. So ginseng is great formula for rebuilding. It helps work on the mitochondria. It's also been known to support sexuality, sexual function, longevity. And then astragalus is one of your big immune tonics. Cordyceps and astragalus are both good. Astragalus helps with the Wei Qi, but It also is very powerful for boosting white blood cells, red blood cells. It can help with your anemic patients. It helps for those of you who are empaths and you take on all your patients' issues. Take some astragalus. It's interesting how well it works on an energetic or psychologic perspective. Immune Plus, a lot of times what happens is when our cortisol levels tank, our body's immune system either gets hyperreactive and we go into an autoimmune response, or we hyper or hyporeactive with our immune system. So really regulating it. Immune Plus is a great formula. Making sure that you're adding in B12, vitamin C, vitamins A and D, potassium and magnesium. Those are the core principles for nutrition. Now with B12, as many of you know, run their MTHFR. See what types of B12 this person needs before you just go and throw them on any old type of B12. And especially do not use cyanocobalamin, cyanide, as some leftovers, and then they're going to need all the methyl donors so that B12 can be uptake into the methylation cycle. So if you're giving them cyanocobalamin, you're doing them a great disservice. Get some sunlight. One of the best things you can do for adrenal glands is getting sunlight. So hopefully this was helpful for you. Gives you some good indications. So just some key summaries, and a lot of you are probably wondering about coffee. Key summaries: adrenal fatigue. You do not want people on stimulants. That's going to blast them out. People who have low cortisol at noon, they need to be exercising at 11 o'clock in the morning. So anytime the cortisol levels drop at their lowest, that's a great time to have somebody exercise. When cortisol levels are too high, that's where you want to use adaptogenic herbs to bring it down, or actually have them do high intense training and making sure they're getting plenty of fats in. The adrenal glands and the cortisol will tend to be high if there's too much inflammation. And so check their C-reactive protein, look at their homocysteine levels, check their MTHFR, their genetics. That's going to be key if it's too high. The other thing that you want to look at is with coffee. I tell my patients, I don't want you doing stimulants, so you can do decaf coffee, but there's still about 50 milligrams of caffeine in it, but you do decaf, but then you add in butter and you add in the MCT or brain octane. And that can be a game changer. I know for a lot of patients, actually there's some really healing properties in coffee. Coffee actually helps release endorphins. Coffee is also good for dopamine production, so it helps create more sensitivity of the dopamine receptors. Always use theanine, L-theanine with coffee, and what you'll find is the brain won't get fatigued, or you won't get the jitters from the coffee. So the only way patients can do coffee is if their adrenal glands have some strength and their cortisol is not totally flatlined. If it's a little bit low, coffee will help get a boost. But the other thing you want to do, if someone's cortisol levels are perfectly normal, then their cortisol is already high in the morning, and coffee will increase it. So just make sure that they don't drink it until later on. Like 11 o'clock is when I'll have my coffee between 11 and 2. Usually by the time I get to noon, I don't even crave coffee at all. I don't want it. So 11, and it's been phenomenal. It feels much better. I sleep better at night. My energy seems to stay nice and sharp throughout the entire afternoon, and it's a great source. I talked about it a lot at the conference, so I won't get into it too much, but make sure you're adding the brain octane, MCT oil, about a tablespoon of either one of those, and then a tablespoon of grass-fed butter. Put some cinnamon in your coffee to balance the blood sugar. Grind it, put it in the blender, blend it really well, and then make sure you're taking some L-theanine, because the adenosine receptors in your brain really get overstimulated by caffeine, and the L-theanine will help stabilize that response. So great. So go get your patients. Any of you can run these tests. It's very simple. If you have questions, many of you are Go Wellness clients, and so send in your lab results to your coach, Dr. Taylor or Dan Kelmans, and have them go through the results with you, so you can actually figure out, if you're on the right track. We'll help you produce the results. Hopefully I'm going to see all of you out at our next event in Brooklyn. It's going to be 4th. If you know anybody out there, tell them it's First Go Wellness event out there, and we're going to be rocking it. And then our next Utah event is going to be February 17th as a ski day. We're thinking Solitude, but I think we may end up in Park City. I've got a pass to both places, but whoever comes to report a findings, you get a free ski pass from us. And a free show of watching Cade, who we like to call Speed Check, just launch off things like this. Um, and then the 18th is going to be the overall training. So we're going to help you collect more cash in a day than you do in a month. And a lot of you are like, oh, BS, you couldn't do that. But I guess it depends on how much cash you're collecting in a day right now. But, if it's, if it's around, $3,000 to $5,000, we're going to help you 10x that. So this will be your best investment you've ever made. So Kanye and Jay-Z will be there. I'm going to be training them as well. So hopefully you guys love the event today and love this past weekend's event. So grateful for everybody tuning in and for all the good work you're doing. More and more people need you. They're looking for the right solution. They need you to be packaging your programs together, bundle these things together, making sure that you're offering the best possible solution for your patients. That's how we can win this game. So any questions that anyone has, I can take those. Otherwise, I'll turn the time over to you, Cade.
Thanks a lot. The only thing we had when you were talking about potassium and good sources of potassium, Charles had mentioned chelated potassium from Albion Labs would be a
Okay,
great second choice.
perfect. Okay, great. Oh, and then I can see the questions here. And Nam asked, do you have any table to show potassium levels in food? Actually, you can just do a Google search, potassium levels in food, and you'll find it. The reason why I have it all hardwired in my brain is because I trained with Dr. Berg for about 5 years, and it's in his book, 7 Principles of Fat Burning. So that's another good resource for that. Cool. And Charles, you are strong like a bull, buddy. And all right, everybody. Thanks so much for being on the webinar, and we will see you next week, same time, same back channel.
Have an awesome day.